Thank you. Our mission statement is advancing constitutional policing and accountability for APD and the Albuquerque community. Can I get approval of tonight's agenda?
I move approval of the agenda.
Anybody have any changes? It's been moved and seconded that we approve tonight's agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any public comments?
Morning, sir. No, he's not. Do I need to sign in, Valerie? Or to use the appeal?
Ted Meniski? Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Ted Niemiecki. I hope this meeting is televised and won't be edited like other meetings are.
Pen in my hand.
So now,
Thank you.
yes, I hear constitutional policing. Well, very interesting. APD, we have, again, APD in the shooting business. Just this week, another. So, cops, lapel camera, only supposed to protect public. No way, not even close. Public meaning film. I have several lapel cameras. Now, cops just betting that everything goes away. Millions of dollars been spent the last 4 years. And now they're waiting another 4 years probably, so things will go away. They design own, I'm lucky of words, I'm so frustrated. So they decide they own. Now, when it comes to oversight, executive director was quickly answered to me last my complaint. Executive. Well, was very quick, except he forgot escalation. That's what, and excessive force. But he never mentioned escalation. Also, he said that when I sign it, I do not waive my constitutional rights. This is offensible defense. Well, where are we going? You know, let me tell you, that is director wars. Offensible defense, writing. Well, you know, let me tell you, I do not waive my constitutional rights, and I won't sign any contract. Because by signing, you are waiving your rights. You are guilty until you prove innocent. That's what that means. So, I'm now director. My case was transferred to federal court from state district court to federal court. Yes, I will subpoena because these cops film me and I file a complaint in a restricted area, film me,
All right,
and
Ted.
I file a complaint, and director never answered my complaint and up in his desk.
Ted, thank you. Thank you. All right. Can I get a review of our minutes for tonight, our last meeting? Say again? 2 sets of meetings. Oh, okay, yes, that's right. You're right. Do we need to review those? I've already written them.
You have?
Mhm.
Okay, then you just make the motion.
Okay. I make a motion that we approve our minutes.
I second your motion.
Then motion and second, all in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Do the second set of minutes, though, Chair.
Okay, let's do them one at a time, yeah.
Okay.
So that was the minutes for, what's the date?
November 8th.
November 8th. That was motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now, can I get a motion for December 4th minutes?
So moved.
I second.
Motion and second that we approve those minutes, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. Reports from city staff. APD, please. Good evening.
Good evening, how are you this morning?
Okay.
So for those of you who don't know who I am Michelle Campbell, and I am the commander of the Compliance Division. I am here this evening on behalf of DC Garcia. He wanted to be here this evening to introduce the new IA commander. So he's Commander Mark Velarde, and he will now be in charge of IA, which will now be named Professional Standards, and that will be reflected in our organizational chart at the first of the year. But I just wanted to introduce him, and he'll take over from here.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Aye.
Welcome.
Thank you. Well,
Congratulations.
I appreciate that. Obviously, I'm trying to get the format of how the POB goes. Hopefully, if I misaddress you guys, I apologize. Here to give the update for November. For dispatch calls for the month of November, we had 40,087 calls. That's a decrease of 1,841 from the month of October. We have 7 internal investigations, none done at the Area Command level. 1 internal case closed administratively. We have 17 alerts distributed through the EIRS system in the month of November. We have, as far as open IA cases, we have 10, and we have 1 case that was opened up administratively in the month of November.
Okay. Any questions for him?
Does this mean that IA is regrouped under one name again, or there were 2 divisions momentarily, right?
No, we still have 2 separate divisions. We just changed the name from misconduct to professional standards, so we'll still be considered internal affairs professional standards now.
I see.
instead of misconduct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Have any? Valerie? Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Internal affairs,
It's
that's him, okay. Sorry.
SOP 1-3.
Yeah. SOP 1-3, do we have anyone?
Chair Wades, I believe this was inadvertently put on the agenda. This was an item that was potentially going to be presented by APD. It's the grooming standards, and we had talked about doing this earlier, and I believe it got sidetracked. But if you have a comment, Director Harness, you look ready to say something.
Yes, Chair Waits, Board Member Dr. Cass. This was actually presented at the last POB meeting, and it's here to circle back for APD to see if we had received any public comment on the grooming standards, specifically the issue of facial hair on uniformed officers and tattoos on display for uniformed officers. I can report from the administrative office that we did not receive any public feedback.
Okay. Any other comments on that? No? Okay. City Council, I don't see anyone. Oh,
Julian.
hey, Julian.
I'm here. Chairman Waits, board members, as you're aware, the City Council reconfirmed Director Harness at its December 4th City Council meeting. At the November 26th Finance Government Operations Committee meeting, They approved a substitute for O1823, which is the police oversight ordinance, then deferred it to the FGO meeting on January 14th. Before that FGO meeting, though, in January, there will be a city council study session on Thursday, January 10th at noon. Both those meetings will be held in the council committee room on the 9th floor of this building. Council has asked for written comments on the bill to be submitted by 5 p.m. on Monday, January 7th, to be included in the discussion at the study session on the 10th. And with that, I stand for any questions.
Can you give me those dates again, please? I'm sorry.
Sure. The next of note will be Thursday, January 10th at noon, and that will be the city council study session. And then Monday, January 14th will be the Finance and Government Operations Committee meeting at 5 p.m. Both those meetings on the 9th floor in the council committee room.
Okay. Okay, any questions? Go ahead.
I just want to say that the meeting that we had with, at the U.S. Attorney's Office with yourself and everybody else from the city and the POP, several of us were there. It was really helpful to have that conversation. I look forward to more of the same kind of fruitfulness that produced. I appreciate it.
Anything else?
No, I have something for the last item. Would you mind if I said something about the last item?
The last item,
1-3?
Oh,
okay.
the previous item, that's what she
Yeah,
means, not the
sorry,
last item on
previous.
the list.
Chairman Waits, if I could just, interlude real quick. If there's no more questions for me, I am gonna, if you don't mind, excuse myself a little bit early this evening. I have some other events for counselors to cover, so. just-
Okay. I don't think we'll have any other questions
Thank you.
for Julian. Go ahead, please.
I hope we didn't drop the ball on this one. I mean, we can't control what comments we do or don't receive from the public, but I'm not sure if APD was wanting comments from us possibly. And I can't speak for the rest of the board, but I have glanced at that policy, and what I would say is that I would support gender neutrality appearing in the policy. And I would be careful with some of the language that might look like it applies to just one gender. I think can be sort of tricky, but I would be careful with that. And then I would also say that I think Chelsea Van Deventer, not a police oversight board, but I think visible tattoos are okay. I think except for the obvious stuff like old prison tats or whatever, you might want to carve out some exceptions, you know? But I think generally speaking, tattoos, facial hair, piercings within reasonableness. You don't want to have, types of piercings, I think, that leave a person more vulnerable to, I don't know, just having a broken earlobe during an altercation or something like that. But I think all of those things are fine within reason. And so I would support those four things: gender neutrality, allowing facial hair, allowing tattoos, barring the obvious things. So in case you wanted to know, because I think you did. So I just wanted to give you something on that. Thanks.
You want to say something?
No, I just agree with everything that she just said, for the record.
I thought about this too, and I thought, how would I feel if I had a police officer that had a SWAT sticker on them or something that represented hate speech? So obviously, I would think that would be on the list of things that wouldn't be okay to show. I feel the same way you do otherwise, but
Okay.
I wanted to specifically hone in on hate speech.
Okay. Do you have a comment?
Yes, at the it was PPRB meeting on the grooming policy, I did let everyone know I will be doing additional research on the gender neutrality issues and APD policy, or police officer policies on that front. And I did actually, fortunately, attend a CLE that pointed me in the direction of some good policies. APD would be in the minority if we did adopt a gender-neutral policy at this point. However, New York City has done so, and their policy is a good starting point that I've found and am going to look at and advise the city regarding. So I just wanted to give you that small update.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment? Alrighty, thank you. Anyone from the mayor's office? I don't see. Okay.
Chair Waits, Mr. Lewis asked me, actually, Mr. Sylvan asked me to pass along that Mr. Lewis is in Santa Fe this evening and would not be here.
Okay, thank you. City Attorney's Office. Anything? Come on back.
Good evening, Chair Waits and members of the board. We don't have a substantial update for you today. Policy 257 is, 256 and 257 are still in the comment period for comments by the monitor and parties. We did receive today the monitor's comments, and we have not yet received any of the other parties' comments. And we've only received the monitor's comments regarding 257. The comments are due the 17th. Once we receive all parties' comments, we will advance to the resolution phase. All of the other policies from 253 through 255 are still also in resolution phase.
Okay. Thank you.
And I don't know if there's any questions regarding any other matters, but that's the status of the use of force policies.
Any comment, question? Okay.
No, thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone from the CPCs?
Here's our buddy.
President Waits, board members, thank you for the opportunity to report to you every month. It has been a real pleasure. And it has, I believe, brought us closer together, because when I first joined the CPC, it was kind of like being out in some kind of gulag somewhere and not really involved at all. And to tell the honest truth, I had no real sense of what the POB did. I just always thought they were around to just kick cops out and show how they didn't like them, and that we were around to help the community learn to love cops. And I've had a complete, 180 on that one. And I realized that we have been remiss in supporting you in some of the actions you've done. But in my CPC's defense anyway, we haven't really known what support you've needed. And so I would like to see us communicate more on that level. I know when you needed our help recently, I was very appreciative that you emailed us and asked for us to come. Believe me, we will do the same when we think we need help from you. We just had our summit this last Saturday, and I think it's really very exciting to see us work on becoming more professional, more organized, and more cohesive. What that's going to look like and where it's going to go is still up in the air. And while I'm here, I would really like to appreciate the fact that Mr. Harness has been to more CPC meetings than anybody else in the entire city, and that I feel humbled that we haven't really tapped into his knowledge and his experience of us as an organization. And believe me, we will from now on.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comment from CPCs? Okay. All right, thank you. APOA? Okay. Mr. Harness, CPOA.
Chair Waits, Honorable Board, good evening. I'm going to keep it short based upon our agenda. Julian already addressed the study session that's set for the 10th of January at noon in the City Council chambers. We did have, we've had We've had 2 opportunities to discuss the ordinance changes with parties and stakeholders. We also have the ordinance on our website for people to review, and we also have a form for the public to comment on the ordinance. So if anyone goes to the website, reviews the ordinance, they have the opportunity to provide comment to us directly so that we have that feedback as we move forward with these changes. PPRB, from the 27th of November, there were four policies at PPRB. 1-20 behavioral science, 2-3 firearms and ammunition, 2-6 use of emergency equipment, and 2-99 naloxone. POB comments are due on those policies by the 10th of January. I voted to move those policies out of PPRB. On the 28th of November, I spoke to the new lateral class out at the academy. It was only their second day, so I'm not sure that was quite the welcoming that they wanted to hear from oversight on the second day, but that went well. I will be speaking to the cadets on the 18th of December, and they will be graduating on the 20th, so there'll be a new cadet class graduating. There's no new date yet for the IMR 8 status report in front of Judge Brack. And as Rowan stated, I was at the CPC Summit on Saturday. I was allowed to address the CPCs for a brief time, and I spoke to them about my vision for their mission having a role in oversight, and how we could collaborate. And I think since the summit, I've gotten some email feedback that will be of interest, and I think that there will be a series of meetings between the chairs of the CPCs, the city council director of services, Stephanie Yara, and the CPC manager, Chris Sylvan, to find ways to collaborate on recruitment for CPCs and POB members, and possibly a way for CPCs to be an aid in having ready replacements for the POB as well. So we'll be having those meetings and those discussions probably after the first of the year. Other than that, I would stand for questions.
The cadet class on the 18th of December, can we attend that, your presentation?
Certainly. My session is going to be at 12:30 on the 18th.
Okay.
I think everybody received the
I did.
invitation to the graduation.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Harris.
Certainly.
All right, let's go to reports from the subcommittees. Committee, are you ready, Chantal?
Hello.
Mr. Rob?
Yes, my apologies for being late. So Outreach Subcommittee met on December 4th. Predominantly discussed was the 2017 annual report. Some other things that we kind of discussed was addressing some misconceptions within the community as to the role of oversight. So we're going to be taking a look at that over the course of 2019 in those coming meetings. Our next meeting is scheduled for January 22nd at 1 o'clock. Really nothing came out of that meeting other than going through the annual report.
Thank you. Dr. Cass?
Yes, I have
Policy
a
and procedure.
handout if you want, for the board, and if you want a copy for the records. This is a summary of the Policy and Procedures Subcommittee meeting. Our last meeting was on December 6th, and was a week ago. The next meeting will be on the 3rd of January, and we have a permanent date and time, or date and place in the basement conference room, and we're going to be starting the meetings at 12:30 and they precede by 1 week the BOB meetings. At the last meeting, we reviewed the annual report at the request of Director Harness, the 2017 annual report and the recommended changes, and Member Galloway has forwarded those, I believe, to the CPOA. There was also some discussion about the language associated with 219, which is SOP 219, which is the response to behavioral health issues, and I believe Member Van Deventer has been dealing with that. And a third policy that, or another issue that came up was the SOP 299, which is the naloxone SOP, or deals with administration of naloxone by trained members of APD. At the previous OPA meeting, there had been some discussion, since this was just a policy which had been reviewed, but there had been discussion that there was concerns at APD that this may or may not be a particularly effective policy, and we suggested that we would look into it and task ISR to do some research regarding the effectiveness of this policy, as opposed to waiting until emergency medical personnel showed up. So that has been forwarded to the CPOA so that we can now ask ISR to do the supporting research and make a recommendation. There's a couple of issues pending. We've had discussion with APD at a couple of meetings about getting the same data as is furnished in the paragraph 298 and to the monitor, but scrubbed of any kind of identification for either officers or citizens. So we're looking forward to getting that. I think this is a process that's in negotiation. Everybody seems to agree that it's a good idea. We're just trying to get it so that it happens. And then there was a pending an old action, which was to get some access to the City of Albuquerque's data storage capability and other aid for creating some access to policy sorts of information, and that's still pending. And I have a list here of the recent OPA presentations and PPRB activity, and it's more or less within the last month, but the things of highlight are the SOP 28, the on-body recording devices is a policy that we had hoped to schedule, and I've been talking with Commander Campbell about how we're going to schedule several of these policies, which we would like to see. And at the moment, it looks like we'll have something ready in the first meeting in January. Other than that, I think that's there's a number of other policies on here, and we're that are CASA related, and we've agreed will be presented to the POB for the purpose of public airing, and so we're looking forward to doing that as we can find the scheduling time. So with that, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cass. Case Review Subcommittee?
Yes. Case Review Committee, we met on November the 27th at 2:30. We have review of cases. We reviewed 8 administratively closed, 1 not sustained, 2 sustained, 1 unfounded, 1 exonerated, sustained not based on original complaint, and 1 not sustained investigation by IA. And all these cases are on our agenda for this evening. Our next meeting is January the 18th, 2019, from 11 to 12.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Fine?
Personnel Committee met, and Personnel Committee met, and we went over the primary work product we were working on was the contract for the executive director. which is still in process, and I don't know if, Ms. Gooch, if you have any updates on that process. Obviously, it's a negotiation with the city.
Chair Waits, Board Member Fine. At this point, I believe that the board is still needing to take a vote on the terms of that contract.
Okay.
Once there is a board position on the terms of the contract, I can then coordinate with you as the chair of the Personnel Subcommittee to go through the processes and procedures we need to with the city. It may be that if the board was so inclined, we could start the process with the city and then finalize the contract. But I would recommend that we finalize at least a proposed contract for the city, have a board vote on that, and then once we have that document authorized by the board to present, that you and I coordinate with the city through the proper channels to get that contract finalized.
So have the changes we made at our Personnel Committee been incorporated into the draft? Do we have a draft now?
I believe that draft was sent a few weeks ago. I don't believe that there had been any changes since the November.
Well, that's the one we worked on at the
Correct.
committee. But we made some changes there. We had some observations. So it was my understanding we were going to go forward with those things and bring it to the board.
It's my understanding those changes were made, they were minimal, and that they were given to the board. If they haven't been sent to you all, we can make sure that happens.
Okay. So we would not be able to vote on it until the next board meeting?
Board Member Fine, yes. If we have not circulated that to the board, I thought it had been circulated, but if it has not, we can make sure that that happens so that it is something that can be voted on at the next meeting.
Is it required that we vote on that at this meeting, at a meeting? Can we do it, because since there's been so much work done on it already, can we just recruit comments so that we can be ready to go on the next board meeting?
Board Member Fine, yes. I believe that if the board would like to delegate that authority through a vote to either the chair of the entire POB or to the chair of the Personnel Subcommittee, that would be an appropriate vote for the board to make.
Okay.
I'm not sure if I received the final copy that you worked on, so I would like to wait until I get the opportunity to read it and make comments before any vote is taken.
Oh, yeah, we wouldn't vote until the next board meeting anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if we have comments and changes we want to make, could we do that, not wait till after the next board meeting and then make changes?
Yeah,
Could we get it
I
ahead
would
of
be
time?
comfortable if I received a copy and if I could email a designated person.
That's what I'm talking about.
You know, and
communication
for the
back.
changes, that's fine.
Would it be okay, open meetings wise, if we distributed that to everybody and had them send the comments back to me? Is that all right, if the board agrees to that?
Yes, because it's a personnel issue, yes, that's something that the content of what the discussion may be among the board about the personnel matter, that would be subject to closed session, but the actual finalization of the contract would have to be through an open meeting, and the contract itself would then be public.
Okay.
Okay, so are we agreed, we're going to get the next contract and get the contract in its current form, sent out to everybody, comments come back to me, when I'll compile those and we'll talk about them at the next meeting. Is that okay? Okay. The other two pieces of this are that it is time to actually start the evaluation process for the executive director for this year. And so, though we're very happy that Mr. Harness's contract was renewed, it is time to start that process again. It takes a while. And we also wanted to be, and we've discussed this among ourselves at this meeting and at Personnel, we've discussed that we need to tie it more closely to the ordinance. Excuse me. And so Board Member Galloway took a look at that and proposed, and that's what we'll be talking about at our next Personnel Committee meeting, about what that evaluation would look like, how we would change that. We also think there needs to be a process of, if there are complaints about the executive director or issues that come up, what do we do with that in between? There's no process for that I'm aware of. So I did ask Katrina if we could start with an job description, which we had when we first hired Director Harness. Were you able to get that, Katrina? Katrina? Oh, I'm sorry.
And the question was, were you wanting?
Well, we need to make sure that, we want to make sure that the job description matches the ordinance, that the evaluation matches the ordinance, that everything matches the ordinance. And so we need the document to be able to make sure of that, and I don't have it.
Chair Waits, Board Member Fine, I will try to locate the original job description in my files. And
Does the city have one for you? Wouldn't the city have one?
most likely the city would have one, but I think I can probably find it easier than going back to
Okay.
HR to.
Anyway, those are the items we'll be talking about at our next Personnel Committee meeting, which is I don't remember the date. I think it's later in the month, just a second. I don't know where it is.
Chair Waits, I
Sorry.
believe it's Tuesday.
I'm sorry?
I believe it's this coming Tuesday.
Yeah, I thought it was the 18th, but I didn't see it. Oh, here it is, yeah. 10 o'clock, Tuesday.
Okay.
We've also talked in an executive session, the chair will decide whether or not he wants us to do this. But Chantel and I have had some conversations. She has a long work experience in the personnel part of the work world. And we are considering asking Chair Waits to switch our positions so that I would chair the Outreach Committee and she would chair the Personnel Committee. But that is Chair Waits' decision, and we'll do that in closed session. So that's all I have.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Thank you, Ms. Fine. All right, let's go into discussions. New hires for APD.
Chair Waits, this was on the agenda last month, and it was not carried, it was carried over because of that. So I'm not sure what questions the board had. So at this point, you could withdraw it or.
I'm not aware.
Okay.
I move to withdraw.
Okay.
Second.
Motion and second that we withdraw this. Item A. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposed. 2019 POB scheduling, we do have a schedule.
That's very helpful.
Okay, thank you for that. We will document that. Anyone have any, can I get a motion on the schedule?
I move to approve the schedule.
Okay.
Second.
Motion second, we approve the schedule for year 2019. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Opposed? Thank you. Thank you for this.
Yeah, it's
Appreciate that.
helpful.
Okay. All right. Where was I? The 2017 annual report.
Chair Waits, Honorable Board, you all have received a copy of a draft of the annual report, and we have received feedback from the subcommittees. There was thought that the analyst would be here to have another discussion regarding questions about the data. I received an email from Dr. Guerin requesting that those questions be submitted to him in writing so that they would have a chance to go through that to do a data integrity check.
So who does that?
That would be Dr. Guerin doing that
Writing
check.
up the questions we had? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, and so Chair Waits and Member Fine, yes, so we would be submitting the feedback from the subcommittees to ISR in a written format.
Do you need us to compile our questions or the minutes from outreach and P&P at least? I assume the other committees did the same process, went through the same process with you all. Do you need us to build that document, or will the minutes from those meetings suffice?
Chair Waits, Vice Chair Galloway, perhaps what I should do is put all of that information together and then disseminate it to you, and then if you had any other questions, then you could supplement that, and then we could get it to ISR.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comment? Joy? No? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Harness.
My apologies. I do want to make a note that, and I've spoken to Amanda about this, that it was brought up in P&P that the outreach committee does not have a section in the annual report, and it is required by the ordinance to do so. So Amanda and I will be working on that, so that will be in addition to what we've already reviewed.
That'd be great for access. Thank you. Okay. IPRA next request.
Chair Waits, Honorable Board, this is an issue that has been requested from the City Clerk's office, and it has to do with how the CPOA and the POB are going to, moving forward, handle the voluminous amounts of IPRA requests that the agency and the board receives from members of the public. Both Director Harness and I have met with the attorneys at the city to talk about the way in which this process could happen so that the agency and the board maintain their autonomy and the fact that they have separate counsel, while at the same time streamlining the process through an infrastructure that's called Next Request. I'm not sure if anyone on the board has had a chance to send an IPRA request to the city or another municipality in the state, but it is an electronic database that is utilized by the city clerk's office here in Albuquerque to ensure that the right folks get the right IPRA request in the right amount of time, because there are very short deadlines associated with IPRA. There is a 3-day acknowledgement deadline that within that 3 days, if the documents are easily accessible, the agency or the board is supposed to produce those documents. There's also a 15-day deadline. And because a lot of the requests that are coming into the POB and the CPOA are dual agency requests with impacting APD and other agencies at the city, what the city clerk's office has asked the POB to consider is a proposal whereby the CPOA and the POB would be part of Next Request. That would entail Director Harness and anyone else that the CPOA would like access to be involved in the electronic process whereby a member of the public submits a request. It then gets tracked through this system so that everyone involved can see who's dealing with it, where it is in the process, and when the matter has been either addressed, closed, or if it remains open. Part of the issue with that, however, is the fact that the CPOA and the POB are independent from the city. And so what you have been presented with is the proposed way in which you all maintain the independence necessary pursuant to the ordinance, but at the same time are able to use the resources that Next Request provides. The hope is that by allowing Director Harness, who is the CPOA's record custodian, to utilize Next Request, that it will make the process cleaner and faster for the public as well as the agency. It will also help create an open line of communication between APD for those dual requests that come in, as well as other agencies. What the city has proposed and that I've looked at that you all have is something called a joint defense agreement. The reason that is necessary, at least in my opinion, is because you do have separate counsel, and if your counsel is working with the city, we don't want to waive privilege on any items that may be subject to attorney-client privilege that are exempted from IPRA. What the joint defense agreement provides is that by the CPOA and the POB having those communications with the city attorneys involved in the IPRA issues, that wouldn't constitute a waiver of your attorney-client privilege. To determine whether there are exempted documents that are being requested or any other issues that may arise in the IPRA scenario. So what the agreement is supposed to do, and if the board has any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them, is to maintain that attorney-client privilege without creating a waiver, but at the same time also maintaining your independence, that if there is a question about whether something should be exempted or not, that you are not deferring to city legal alone, that they will coordinate with your attorneys to ensure that everyone is on the same page about those exemptions or those productions. Also included in your packet is a workflow document to help kind of understand what next request actually looks like and how the process happens. I believe this is all information that's available in the city clerk's office, but what it provides is what happens from the receipt of a records request through the production of responsive documents. And I'm looking at this and it's very small and it's in white, but it provides how the process happens for those requests and when legal gets involved and when they do not, and when exemptions occur and when they do not, and when redactions need to happen for things like personal identifying information. There's certain requirements pursuant to the statute that personal identifying information be redacted, but the public is entitled to receive a lot of the other information. In short, what this proposal is to allow the CPOA and the POB to utilize Next Request to keep track of IPRA requests the way that the city does, while maintaining autonomy that you all have through the ordinance for independence, and not waiving attorney-client privilege when or if those types of questions arise with regard to IPRA requests.
Okay. Who actually does the redactions? Who does that?
Chair Waits, it will depend on whether it is a dual request or if it's simply an agency request that comes directly to the CPOA. In the instance that it's a request for documents solely within the possession of the CPOA, I believe that that's something Director Harness has been doing and likely will continue to do for purposes of IPRA responses. If it's information coming from APD, I believe that's something that APD has been doing and would continue to under this process. It simply would mean that everyone is in the same database, understanding who is doing what and when.
Okay. Any questions? Any questions? Okay. Thank you. Good job.
Yes. And Chair Waits, if this is something that the board is inclined to take a vote on, I have indicated that the board was going to hear it on their agenda tonight and that I would get back to the city clerk with a decision, whatever it is that the board has on this topic. And to be clear, the board can decide to not use Next Request. It can decide to use Next Request pursuant to this joint defense agreement, and it can choose to take more time to discuss the topic.
At one point, I feel as though you were a little worried about venturing into Next Request. Does that concern remain?
Chair Waits and Vice Chair Galloway, yes. With this joint defense agreement that would be executed by my office on behalf of the CPOA and the POB and the city that would maintain that attorney-client privilege, that was the main concern, is that we would not want to be waiving attorney-client privilege unnecessarily by utilizing Next Request. And that's not the intent. The intent is to make it so that the documents are more easily accessible to the public quicker.
Yeah, I'd like to hear Director Harness's opinion on this.
Chair Waits, Member St. John. From the standpoint of the CPOA, I would welcome the assistance of being in the system for tracking. That would be one less internal tracking that I would have to do. And then instead of me having to email 2 or 3 different agencies to find out what the status is, I would be able to access the request, and I could see all of the parties that have touched the request, and if in fact they've met the request. So I am in favor.
Okay, thank you.
Just a typo on here on the second line, to Police Oversight Board.
I'm going to make a motion that we adopt this new procedure, buy into next request, with the caveat of what is laid out in the joint defense agreement. That's my motion.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been motion and second by majority vote.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank
Thank
you.
you for your work on that, Tina.
It has passed unanimously. I thought I said that. Thank you. Okay. CASA ordinance and training? Mr.
Yes,
Harness?
Chair Waits. Given all of the discussions that we've had in the past couple of weeks regarding the settlement agreement and the ordinance and land in between, we thought it was appropriate that the board schedule a training session to review the POB, the CPOA's obligations under the ordinance and the settlement agreement. So what we would like is for you to submit some dates of availability so we can schedule that training.
I have a question.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Are we going to wait until it's completely changed to do that? Is that what you mean? Like, do you have any ballpark idea of what the timeline is for the city council to?
Chair Waits, Board Member Fine, no, I don't. I think that there's some, well, it's up to the board. If you want to wait until the ordinance changes are in place, ideally, we could try to do it when a new member comes on board, and then it could be a refresher for you, and it could be new training for a new member.
I just wondered what you had in your mind with this, in terms of timing.
Well, the ordinance requires it on an annual basis, so
Okay.
We're just trying to make sure that we're meeting the training schedules.
Okay, I propose that we wait till maybe February.
Do we have an idea of when we can expect new board members? I may have missed that in my tardiness, but
No.
I'm sorry, Chair Waits, Vice Chair Galloway, no, we do not.
it wouldn't be a POB meeting if I didn't ask the question. Okay, yeah, I don't know if we have no idea of when to anticipate
Well-
a new board member.
Well, based on this being the holiday and New Year's, I would suggest January, February timeframe, late January, February timeframe. Any objections?
No, not necessarily. I also would suggest that rather than having 6 of us submit dates, multiple dates, that maybe the CPOA office can say, here you go, pick one, and then we can pick the most favored date from there.
That's good. Good suggestion. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, when do we think we can expect that? Next week? Thank you.
Okay. The ordinance amendments. Mr. Varnes?
Chair Waits, this is on the agenda to allow the board to have a public discussion about the ordinance amendments as proposed. I believe we've all had a chance to review them. There were a few of us in a meeting with the monitor, the DOJ, City Council, the APOA. So this is the board's opportunity to have a public discussion regarding those changes.
I guess I would want to recap the public what, to be clear, Ms. Van der Venter, Dr. Cass, myself and Valerie were there at the meeting that Mr. Harness is referring to. We had, I thought, a healthy conversation. We didn't agree on everything, and we don't have resolution on everything, but it was a good conversation, and we learned, I'll speak for myself, I learned what their motivation was. Some of the things that didn't make sense to me were because they were trying to make it less burdensome on new board members. And I think that they really heard us. I think we heard them. I think it was a useful conversation, but it's not over. And November, we're supposed to submit our comments by January 7th. And then we have a meeting on the 10th. Oh, is that the study session? Yes. And then the following meeting is the one where it will come up is 14th of January. And that means that's when it gets passed or gets voted on by the city council?
Chair Waits, Bemmer, fine, that's at the subcommittee level, Finance and Government Subcommittee level.
Okay.
January
that's right.
14th.
You're right, yeah.
And I think one of the issues besides having the discussion about the ordinance was the board deciding how to divide the labor as to who was going to submit what written comments over what portion, because the request is that the comments be submitted in writing to all the parties.
And the deadline is January 7th.
Correct, January 7th.
So that means that what we need to do at this time is we actually need to go back through and take positions, I think. And then any one of us can reduce them to writing. But, last time we had the general conversation, and this time we need to actually say, this is how the board feels about item 1, item 2, item 3, et cetera.
Are we going to do that tonight?
I don't have mine with
Why?
me. I can bring it. You do? Okay. What's the status of our process and how we're going to take this vote? Okay.
I probably have enough
Good idea.
copies for everybody.
Any comment on process or suggestions?
Chair Waits,
Yes.
I don't know what would restrict the board members from making individual comments about what they, just as any member of the public could. And I think that's the intent of this process, is to gather, it's the council's process to write the ordinance, and they're inviting the public, including particularly interested parties such as ourselves, to participate in that. So I think that we may want to submit a board opinion as to what we would like. There's also the necessity of protecting the minority opinion, and I think that other public, as members of the public, we can comment on this just like anyone else. I'm not sure what the purpose of a unified board opinion would be on legislation like this. So I'd like to reserve the ability for anyone on the board to make comments on the ordinance just like any other member of the public.
Okay. I'm going to throw this out here and we can decide how we're going to do it. But I think we've gone through this page by page. I think we all have an opinion. I think we should have one person if there's anything within this policy that you feel strongly about, we know what the changes are going to be or what we felt they are. Let's have one person or everyone submit those comments to that one person, okay? Does that make sense? And that way we don't have to go through this whole thing again like we did the other night. Does that make sense? So with that being said, is there any volunteers to receive those?
I don't mind doing it.
Okay. So, Ms. Galloway, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, but my question, I guess, to start with would be, did we get the compilation of everything in here that is not in line with the CASA? Is that
Yes.
completed?
Yeah.
That was sent to us.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know that I saw that.
Okay.
My bad, sorry.
Oh, I didn't see it either.
So,
Okay, so maybe
so
not.
let's resubmit that, let's resend that, okay? Would you-
What are we doing? I'm totally unclear on what's happening right now.
Well, instead of going through page by page,
Uh-huh.
I mean, we went through that in our last meeting, and we made individual comments or positions. I think now what we need to do, instead of going through it again, would have one person, if you have something that you feel very strongly about, submit that to make sure that, that's implemented.
So, but then what happens is we don't take any votes, and it's kind of just a free-for-all then. We don't have, if we do it that way, we will
Well,
not have a board position.
May I ask a clarifying
Sure.
question? For those of you who were at that meeting, was the request that the POB submit
Yes.
an opinion on this? So I think that if we have individual opinions, we can submit those individually, but I do think the board should take a position as well, if that is what was requested of us.
Okay, and I agree. And that can be done by vote of the entire, or
I don't see how.
we have to go through each item again?
Yeah.
I don't think it'll require as much discussion, though.
All right, so let's do this.
Can you do that tonight?
You have the policy?
I don't have I do.
All right.
And Ms. Gooch, did you want to weigh in? I saw your finger on the button.
I'm just looking for how we process to do this.
Chair Waits, Vice Chair Galloway, I think you all got to where I was going to weigh in on, is that if the board is going to present an opinion or commentary on behalf of the board in anticipation of that January 7th deadline, you all do need to go through the process and take positions or decide not to take positions. Either way, that's up to the board. But if the board wants to present a position on behalf of the board, I believe now is the opportunity to do that, unless there is a request to call a special session at some point prior to that January 7th deadline.
Chair Waits? Yeah, I just don't see logistically how the board can arrive at a position on all of these before the council would like to have the comments to them. So January 7th is the deadline that the council would like to consider comments. And so we aren't going to meet before January 7th. I'm sorry?
Aren't we doing it right now?
I think that's my
Well,
recommendation, is that we do that right now and we vote right now and take that position, because we've already discussed it previously. We had that special board meeting to discuss, so I don't think that it should take as long. We just need to codify things.
Oh, this is the one, okay, then I have it. And this is Yeah.
So Chair Waits, one direction you were going, which I do think we need to include also at this time, is we do need someone to take on the task of reviewing whatever video we're making, I guess, and putting a document together for the city council. Okay.
So, Chair Waits, what I see is this is an agenda item under discussion, and I don't see it as an item for a motion, which is what we're launching into. So I guess I'd like for clarification.
It's on our agenda.
It's on our agenda as an item for discussion.
Chair Waits, Board Member Dr. Cass, we just took a vote on the other items under discussion. I don't believe that there's any need to say that there is going to be an action under the discussion when it's inherent in the form of the agenda, that all items under their discussion were being voted upon, including the meetings coming up for 2019, the discussion about the annual report, the vote on the IPRA next request submission. And so I believe that's a difference without a distinction for purposes of whether the board would like to take positions on these items.
Okay, thank you. So with that being said, let's start on,
Chair Waits,
yes,
might I start?
please. Thank you.
Maybe gather some momentum. I would like the board to entertain a motion that on page 2 of the draft, at line 28,
Wait a second, I got 14 copies of this thing, just a minute. I have two, but I don't know what. Here
She
we go.
gave it to me.
Here we go.
Oh.
Here's another one. Does anybody need one?
Well, we're all going to need this one to follow
Say
along.
page 2, go ahead.
so line 28 through 31, that language reflect directly paragraph 272 of the settlement agreement.
I move that we, that our position statement on lines 28 through 31 is that this language should directly reflect paragraph 272 of the settlement agreement.
Second.
It's been motion and second that we adopt paragraph 272, right? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay. We have 6 to 0 vote. Okay. Thank you.
Chair Waits, would you like me to continue?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay.
My signals.
Chair Waits, I would like the board to entertain a motion on page 3, line 15, that reflect the board's original recommendation of the budget being 0.8 as opposed to 0.5.
Okay.
Chair Waits.
Yes, sir.
So I believe at the meeting with the DOJ, with the city president, the request was that we submit some supporting evidence for our budget needs. And so are we prepared to do that? Because there was some discussion about this, and it returned from the 0.8 that we had back to the 0.5, and it's, of course, that's the same amount as we have now. And I think if it were, 0.8 is a significant increase, and I think in order to, if we need that, I think we ought to be able to justify it. And so I would suggest that we furnish some, along with this recommendation, we would furnish a need to, how we're gonna, how we need that money.
Ms.
I
Galloway?
think that that's a fair point. I think that we did ask that we see what the number was before the GRT increase and after, what our budget was prior to that and what it is now, to see if that 0.8% was still needed. I know that we were talking about additional positions that may need to be funded and whatever that direction has gone in your office, but I think that in order to know if that's still a position we want to take, we need to know what those numbers are.
Okay, so we won't take a vote on this position.
I think Chelsea has that.
Vice Chair Waits, Vice Chair Galloway, to supplement the rest of you with the information that was discussed at that meeting. The temperature of most of those in the room was that 0.8 would be proper funding. APD Forward did mention that they utilized a formula to determine what the proper funding of this agency would be. I made the further argument, and I believe someone from Albuquerque, I was the executive director actually of Albuquerque Healthcare for the Homeless, made the point that this is codified in an ordinance, and so it creates a really great difficulty in increasing our budget later on. Because every time we have a need for a budget increase, we have to do it through changing the ordinance, which is really inefficient. It kind of makes it impossible. And then third, it did sound as though Director Harness was going to be able to supplement the city with that information needed to justify such an increase. So my motion, for all of those reasons, my motion would be that we take a position that we would like the 0.8%, and secondly, that Director Harness does follow through and furnish the information necessary to support that 0.8%. And so I'm making that two-part motion.
I second.
Okay.
And can we just add, and you're prepared to provide them with that information and us, please?
Chair Waits, Vice Chair Galloway, the point that I would make is that this is codified in an ordinance, and it is also in anticipation of growth and need, and is an attempt to comply with what the CASA states is to provide necessary resources. If we're simply going to provide our numbers as we use them today and then lock ourselves into that number, then it gives us no ability but to have to go back and every year go to the committee of the whole and say, we need more money for this, we need more money for that. This is an attempt to make the process more efficient and provide us the room to add positions or do the things that are necessary so that we can live up to the mission in the ordinance and in the settlement agreement. So I can certainly give you some numbers from the past, but it would also then have to include projections for adding positions and things that at this point aren't concrete anticipations.
Chair Waits, and I think we're in agreement. I think it's just a question of whether we include projections, that was the intent of this, is that whatever we're asking for is a future need, and so it would have to include a projection. So, I mean, I just want to support what we ask for, and I think we can do it by asking, by anticipating what our future needs will be, or estimating what our future needs will be, and I think that gives more credibility to the request. So.
And to clarify my motion, I wasn't suggesting, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I wasn't suggesting that we do it just by following, just by sending an old budget. I agree completely that it will have to include projections of, this is how the CPOA POB intends to grow. This is how this money gets spent over time. So I definitely didn't intend to create those barriers.
Do you have a ballpark? Just, I'm not going to, hold your feet to the penny or anything, but do you have a ballpark of what that GRT increase did for your budget at CPOA?
Chair Waits, Vice Chair Galloway, the fiscal year increase from 2018 to 2019 was approximately $200,000.
That's what I thought I remembered. And how many positions do you anticipate needing to add?
Chair Waits, Vice Chair Galloway, I'm not sure at this point. There's certainly admin for the POB, which has been discussed. There's some serious consideration for bringing back in-house the policy/data analytics.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that we could make the agency more efficient if we had a complaint intake worker. But that would be a newly created position. And I would also, given the fact that we've been told that we have the autonomy over our budget, I would like to give the staff a step increase, which they have not received in over 12 years. So all of those things would be in consideration for the budget.
And Ms. Gooch, I'm sorry, Chair Waits, one more. Is this one of those where we have to take a position as we vote, or can we, I know that I would be more comfortable waiting to have some numbers.
Well, we can always change it
Chair
later.
Waits,
Well,
Vice Chair Galloway, if you want to
floor.
have a
I know, but it's part
position
of discussion.
for the 7th, then yes, you would need to take a vote. If you don't,
Individually.
if you individually do not, then I would guess that whatever vote is pending, you would vote against. I just want to add that during the meeting, one of the things that the Department of Justice mentioned when there was the roundtable discussion about the ordinance is that with the increase in the budget for the police, that inherently is going to increase the number of complaints that you as an agency and as a board are going to be dealing with. And so that is something to keep in mind. I don't have any numbers, and it wasn't something that was articulated in a precise fashion. It was simply a function of when you have a bigger police department and you have a better job of informing folks how to complain, that your complaints will go up and your commendations will go up, and better or worse, it's just a function of if you have more police officers on the streets, that's just something to be aware of.
Okay, thank you.
That's fine.
I think we should just go with Chelsea's recommendation, her motion. And if we can always roll it down if the justification doesn't justify it. I think Bill's point is well taken. I'm not in favor of asking for more money than we can justify. But for the sake of all the things that have been mentioned here, let's just go with point 8. And the justification would have to be available to us by the 7th. We can always, in those conversations, change our mind. Dial it back.
Any other comment? Okay, there's a motion on the floor, and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, there's 6-0. Okay.
Chair Waits, I would like the board to entertain a motion on page 4.
What's the item? Because we're all looking
Line-
at different documents.
On page 4, line 24.
We don't all have that one, so. Line 24, he says here.
Is it maybe line 22 you're thinking of?
Actually, I think the discussion was to simply
Here it is. It's this.
eliminate, after objectively eliminate the sentence unless evidence establishes otherwise, the CPOA shall ensure that the public is aware that those last three lines, essentially from 24 through 26.
And as I recall, actually, that was where the conversation started. But ultimately, I think Dr. Ginger and Mr. Killebrew thought that we should advocate striking, or it was their position, and something for us to consider, that we should advocate striking everything after the word complaints in line 22. So we would agree to the insertion, hypothetically. The CPOA shall also promote a spirit of impartiality in its review of civilian police complaints, period. Strike all of the remaining language through line 26. This was the idea. I guess the idea was that the city wanted more emphasis within our ordinance surrounding impartiality than currently exists. But the other side of this situation is that everyone agreed that this last sentence was completely impractical. There wasn't a single soul in the room who thought that this last sentence could really work or offer any benefit. And then I guess the conversation then kind of centered around and starting on 23 through objectively on line 24. And everyone thought that, there was a lot of conversation around this, but essentially there was some concern that it didn't fit with the rest of the ordinance as a matter of principle, because we do policy work stemming from cases. And then the second thing was that this sentence tends to be sort of procedural, and we're not in a procedural part of the ordinance, so it didn't work in that way. And so it seemed as though, if I'm wrapping up what happened, that essentially what most landed on was ending at complaints on line 22. Although I do think that the APOA thought that the whole sentence should stay, but I believe they were the only party who thought the whole sentence should stay. And I thought all of the reasoning presented made a lot of sense, so I would suggest we take that as our position.
So let's,
Sorry.
Make it a motion.
I was going to motion it.
okay, thanks.
Then I move that we strike everything after "and shall ensure" on line 22 through line 26.
Strike
Everything after the
after
word
civilian
complaints.
complaints, ugh, on line
I
22.
second.
So motion and second that we strike everything after complaints. All in favor?
Aye.
6-0. Thank you. Mr. Ernest?
Yes, Chair Waits, actually, if we move up the page, I think that all the parties were in agreement that line 16 and 17 was redundant for specific outreach reporting as opposed to that being included in the annual report. So entertain a motion that lines through a written and oral presentation at a city council meeting be struck.
Chair Waits, I move that we strike the language that's underlined in line 16 and 17.
Second.
Okay. It's been motioned and second that we strike the language on line 16.
I would also just like to say that I think all these are made as motions to recommend that we strike the language. These are recommendations that we're making.
It establishes our position.
Our position, that's what we're doing. And then we'll recommend our
It's what we
position.
submit to the council.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Dolly, you got to vote. Okay. 6-0. Okay, Mr. Harness?
Can I just, since we backed up on that one, there was just a couple of notes that you had on page 3, beginning with line 16 and 17, and then into line 21. Was there anything that needed to be done with that? Okay, thank you.
Oh, okay. Chair Waits, there's an issue that I'm not sure this ordinance resolves, but at the bottom of line 4, moving to line page 5 at the top, or as subsequently amended is the language. And there needs to be some congruence between the levels of force and what are being incorporated in 252, levels 1, 2, and 3, as opposed to the definition of serious use of force, which has been changed in the settlement agreement, and it's not quite reflected here in the ordinance.
Do we have proposed language?
Chair Waits, Vice Chair Galloway, no. At the time, we did not have proposed language.
Okay.
But the gist of it was that that we were supposed to, it was supposed to accommodate 3 levels of violence, of use of force, excuse me. And the thing that came up that Mr. Killebrew, I think, brought up was that the FRB has a cross sample of levels 1 through 3, and that was useful. Is that what you recall?
Chair Waits, Member Fine, yes, that's correct. The Force Review Board is going to review all level 3s, all level 2s, and a random sampling of level 1s. Level 2s are not necessarily serious uses of force. And the discussion was, is there an overlap between the definition of serious use of force and levels 2 and levels 3 as defined in the new policy? The question, I guess, boils down to is, at what level does the city contemplate that it wants a review of that, a review of all of those types of cases?
So we don't have any wording for that in that position.
So can we just make a sidebar that this is unresolved on the part of the DOJ and the city? I make a motion that we do that.
There's been motion and second. You have a comment?
I just have a comment, and I think there's no reason that we need to weigh in on every change here, and if we're silent on it, that could act in the same way as what you're suggesting, I think. I mean, in a sense, I think that's an action we're not obligated to take if there's nothing that we think will come of it, or it's not something that we have, very much interest in. I mean, it's not within our control. So
I'm just suggesting that we just mark it as unresolved, not with us. And so that we didn't skip over it, or we haven't said it's okay the way it is.
All right, we do have a motion on the floor, so we need to carry that motion through, whether we accept it or.
Right, but I just want to make sure that if we're marking this as unresolved, if we're doing that, basically what we're doing is we're just highlighting that this doesn't match the new levels of force. And so we're not weighing in on that. That's what we're going to essentially say, correct?
I think isn't this about it jiving with the CASA and all that?
Yeah.
So, with that being said, we either accept or deny this motion. All in favor?
Aye.
1, 2,
I don't remember the motion.
3.
We're saying that we're just leaving this unresolved. That was the motion, right?
Unresolved.
Okay, aye.
Okay. That'd be 6-0. Okay. Thank you. Ed?
Chair Waits, there are many changes that the board has already recommended as we move past those. And we go to page 8. I would like the board to entertain a motion that line 15 through 17, that the board shall dedicate a majority of its time to the functions described in this subsection, which would be policy recommendations, that not be stricken from the ordinance, that it remain.
Did we skip over the raw data part?
Chair Waits, I would so move on page 8.
Okay.
I would second the motion.
Okay. It's a motion and second that we not strike out lines 16 and 17 on page 8. All in favor?
Aye.
Did you,
Chair Waits, Board Member Fine, regarding your question about the raw data, that was an objection by the APOA, which I don't believe to be valid. So that was our recommendation for our access to data, so I believe it should stay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree with you.
Okay. But
would you mind
we
if
have
I
to
cut in here really quick?
say,
Say it again?
I just, can I cut in really quick? I don't want us to skip, there was one thing I feel like we're in danger of skipping over.
well, let's just finish this motion.
Oh, I'm sorry, are we in
And
the
that
middle of a motion?
completes
I
that
thought we voted.
section. Once we finish that motion, we can go back. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I actually oppose. I think we can give them that.
Okay, 5 to 1. Okay. Okay, if you have something we need to go back to, let's do it now.
Thank you. Sorry about that, Chair Waits. So on that same page, page 8, lines 3 through 6, there was some discussion about actually, though this is our language, there was some discussion that maybe we adopt APD forwards language. That was essentially just the addition of innovative practices into the police best practice language. So we don't get rid of anything, we just add innovative practices. I thought their reasoning for that was really good. And I would like to do that. I don't know. I think when we discussed this, we all thought it was a good idea, if I remember.
Yeah, we did.
Okay, so I would move that we make our position statement, that we adopt the APD forward recommendation regarding innovative best practice languages be adopted for line 6, 3 through 6.
Okay.
Second.
8.
Page 8.
I second.
Okay. Any comment? Motion and second that we adopt particular language. All in favor?
Aye.
Chelsea?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you for that. I'm sorry for interrupting.
All right. 6-0. Does that count? Okay.
Chair Waits, I don't recall the discussion, and I don't have any notes about, on page 9, lines 2 through 7. Whether or not that's acceptable to the board, that is, that the
Yeah, we struck that whole thing.
POB shall, the chair shall have one POB member serve on each policy development committee along with the director, and shall vote in a manner consistent with any prior related action by the POB, and shall report back to the board about outcomes and votes cast at the next regularly scheduled meeting of the POB. I think the discussion was that would be something that is more appropriate for your policies and procedures as opposed to being in the ordinance.
So they want to strike the whole
Yeah,
sentence.
that's what we talked about, is striking the whole thing. This is an example of them trying to make it so that.
But this was, I strongly disagreed that we should strike this. This was our language. This was language we recommended.
Okay.
I know that there were definitely people in that room. Oh, am I wrong on that?
Chair Waits, Member Vandementer, I don't believe that this was suggested language for the ordinance. It was not what the board presented in the original draft. Certainly, the board has adopted language and a position after that, but this was not proposed language by the board that was sent to City Council. I believe the discussion was that this is more appropriate for your procedures, and you can conduct your business how you choose to conduct your business. The only caveat, the important thing here is that the ordinance mandates that POB and CPOA have seats on APD's policy development processes. The language after that is something that was added.
Okay, I apologize. I stand corrected. I thought that we had submitted that language, but I was incorrect.
Okay.
Yes, that Director Harness does accurately characterize the conversation. It seemed that most people in the room thought that we should not have this in the ordinance, that we should just take care of it within our own procedures. I personally want it in the ordinance, but I don't, in that room I was certainly in the minority, and in this room I don't know.
Okay. So do we have a motion?
I move that we strike that language from the ordinance.
Be specific. Be specific, which
Lines,
from,
lines 2 through 7 on page 9.
okay.
No, you don't want,
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think it's
all right,
lines
line-
5.
Line 3,
Line-
I'd like to amend my motion to include striking the language, starting with the director and the POB member designated by the chair, et cetera,
that's where you
through
want us
the
to
end
do
of
it?
line
That's-
7.
Yeah,
That wasn't what we discussed
do
there.
we have a second?
It was just the last.
Well, we've got to ask. It's been
Okay.
moved now.
All right.
Oh, okay, all right, you can, all right.
You got to amend if you're going to change
That's
that.
CASA compliant to do it that way.
Okay, one more try. I recommend that move that we have it read, the chair of the POB shall designate one POB member to serve on each APD policy development committee. The director and the POB member designated by the chair shall each serve as voting members of such committees.
Period.
Period.
Right.
And strike the rest.
All right, it's motion in second.
Now, having said that, there may be a problem in that APD has a different view of whether we have voting positions on each of these committees. And so by us assuming that there's voting positions, it also assumes their policy.
Isn't that in their policy?
Well, I believe, in fact, for the For OPA, the voting process is somewhat looser, and whether there's, I mean, rarely are votes taken in OPA, and I'm not sure that there are official voting members of OPA. But for the PPRB, there are certainly voting members. But they're free to change that policy depending
This is
on
stating what we
they,
want.
on what, well, no, APD is free to change the policy
Right.
themselves, and so it's a little bit difficult for us to say that we have voting members on committees that APD forms. Is all.
This is
I
what we're
That's
asking
my
the
Yeah.
ordinance to say.
And I suppose that APD is a voice at the table in this process as well, right? Just as we do, so that if they wanted to strike the language, voting members, they could have that opportunity to voice that for themselves.
Well, I think they could write an ordinance, write an SOP that defines the process, and
But we're talking about this.
I
Right.
realize that, but what this deals with is us saying that we want the ordinance to say that we have voting memberships on committees that APD defines within their SOPs. And I don't think that's a workable situation.
I hear you. I think the APD is anticipating us having voting members. They're continuing to draft new SOPs with that in them, so, if I remember correctly from OPA meetings. So I think that if they want to strike it because they anticipate changing that, I think that's up to them.
Okay.
As far as we go, it's different.
Any other comment?
He has a motion, I second it.
We have a motion, let me complete that. We have a motion on the floor and second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 No.
No. Okay. 5 to 1.
Okay.
Okay, Ed?
Chair Waits, moving along. Right below, line 9, the board should be composed of 9 members as opposed to 7.
I make a motion that we leave that at 9 members.
Yes, I second.
Motion and second that we leave it at 9 members. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Valerie? Thank you. Shaking of the head there. All right. Ed? Yes, I'm sorry. George?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, further down on page 9, and I believe that while we don't have language for it, APD Forward is going to suggest some language for accountability for city council for filling vacancies on the board. So they're going to be drafting some language that would hold the city council accountable for, it was not in that. This was something that came up subsequent to their written proposals that we had received.
I make a motion that we make our position statement that we would like to see the language on page 9, line 29 adopted.
Which one is it?
And for filling vacancies. I second.
It's in motion and second that we accept language in line item 29. All in favor?
Aye.
Chelsea?
Aye. Sorry.
Valerie? Great. 6-0.
So was there ever
She wants to ask you a question.
Who does? Oh, yes.
Go ahead, Ed.
Yes, Chair Waits, moving along on page 10, line 9 through 12, I believe that there were many thoughts that that should be stricken.
9 through 12.
On page 10.
What page was that?
Page 10, lines 9 through 12.
Okay.
Under E.
Mm-hmm.
I move that we recommend striking lines 9 through 12 on page 10.
I second.
Motion second that we strike line 9 and 10 on page 10. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm going to start on this end and work my way back this
Chair
way.
Waits, for clarification,
6-0.
was it lines 9 through 12 or lines 9 through 10 that the vote was regarding?
No, it should be
12.
Line through 9 through 12, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I might throw in one thing. I believe that it was also discussed that line 8 should end after POB. And that we should not advocate that the city council have the ability to remove board members, because that interferes with independence.
Okay.
So it would, I could make a supplemental motion, that we also, take a position in favor of striking words itself or the city council on line 8.
I would suggest that we add to that of either the itself or the city council,
Oh, right.
just for
So
tidiness.
I guess it needs to be a little bit of a rewrite then. It should just say, yeah, oh yeah, I see. Strike of either, and then strike itself or the city council. That will be my motion.
Second.
Motion is second that we make those corrections. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
That, Chair Waits, I think that's actually a separate issue, and it's just another motion. Dealing with line 7 and 8.
Right. Correct.
She's got some.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, Ed.
Chair Waits, also on page 10, at line 5, and we need Dr. Cass's help with this for the math.
The math wasn't right, if I
The math
remember
doesn't
correctly.
work.
Yeah.
Which line is it?
Do I need to make the motion that we?
We do need you to make the motion.
That's my job here.
What page and what line?
It's still
I
on
move
10,
on
line
line
5.
5 of page 10, that the
The math doesn't work.
math doesn't work out, so that no more than 5 at the current, is what it currently reads, no more than 5 of the members are eligible for reappointment or replacement each year. 2 does not work, 3 could work, so we could use 3 as a number, but, you know, that's the way the original appointment process was set up, so that there would be 3 staggered term, 3 members expiring each year on a 3-year basis,
So your recommendation?
So I would recommend that we
Your motion.
change, I
Your
would
motion.
recommend that we move to change this from 2 to 5, to 3, sorry.
Yeah, 2 to 3.
Okay,
Then I move that we change it to 3.
okay. All right. So,
All those in favor?
all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you. Okay, Ed?
Chair Waits, also on page 10, as I move in. At line 19, paragraph F. All the way onto the next page. I think maybe it would be cleaner just to simply say that orientation and training, as outlined in the ordinance, should reflect the standards as set forth in the CASA. that would take care of all of that.
So I agree with Director Harness. The city tried to get rid of some training in order to ease the burden of being a board member, which it was kind of them. But unfortunately, the training is just in the CASA, and so that can't be revised until, you know, the CASA goes away, then maybe we could consider it. So I think the motion that I'm making is that we recommend that all of the orientation and training beginning on line 10, proceeding through the rest of the ordinance must be CASA compliant.
Okay.
I think the CASA paragraphs are paragraphs 274 through 276.
And I think they probably are going to want to, like, nail it down, but we can do that in our committee meeting. We can do it that way. But I think that you capture the gist. I second your motion.
Okay. I was trying to figure out the easiest way to say it. I modeled it after Director Harness's least complicated idea for putting out there.
So how
Easy to do it like
exactly,
this.
okay, well, I guess we need to vote on that and then we'll figure that out.
Gotta get a second.
I think Joanne seconded.
You second.
I did.
All in favor?
Aye.
6-0.
So then are we taking the language from the CASA and moving it into it? Okay.
Chair Waits, moving on to page 12, the debate at line 7 is the Civilian Police Academy.
The what?
The Civilian Police Academy.
Okay.
And the department has already adopted and adapted and put forth a Citizens Police Academy that accommodates for 2 weekends as opposed to the 12 weeks of the full academy. And I believe that they've already, in their mind, determined what portions are necessary and relevant for the POB. So the question is whether or not this is a proper reflection in the ordinance.
Well, we did talk about how, at the meeting, we did talk about how those changes had already been made. They just weren't reflected in the ordinance. So why wouldn't we just put what the new stuff is? If you can get that to Chantel, then we can just put that in the language. Does that make sense?
We can also, didn't APD Forward have a recommendation? Maybe we could just use theirs. I think they had a recommendation that they just do like a compressed or condensed or something like that.
Just a second.
Chair Waits, Member Vanderventure, I believe their recommendation was for 1 weekend. But it didn't really have any details on content.
Yeah, I think we worked hard on that content changes, and we should, you know, APD, and we should use what we agreed to.
So
Makes sense.
APD Forward's recommendation reads, complete those portions of the Civilian Police Academy that APD, past and current POB members and community stakeholders determine are necessary.
Which we have already done.
Right. So that was, but that's, I think, the
Oh,
language.
you mean just use the language?
Yeah, I
or
think that's
something?
the language they recommended. I don't think that's what's on the paper. But
Now, I think if I were on the city council, I would worry about it not being nailed down, you know, because then you have to rely on institutional memory.
I get that, but if we do nail it down, the flip side of that is if we do nail it down, then you gotta change the ordinance. If they feel like we need to add something, or there's something that
Well,
we
and
don't feel like
maybe-
is necessary.
Maybe it's as is on file at the academy. you know.
Yeah.
I mean, something that references where it's at.
Chair Waits and Member Fine, I think that APD Forward's recommendation suggests a collaborative process for defining what is relevant, and it includes yourselves and other stakeholders. And so I think that that language is good, because certainly there will be changes and evolutions and innovations within law enforcement that we may not be able to codify in an ordinance.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. So then I guess I would I would move that we adopt APD Forward's language as our position.
Second?
I second.
Okay, it's been motion and second that we adopt the language. All in favor?
Aye.
6-0. Okay,
Chair Waits, further down the line, on page 12, simply striking line 25 to 26, dictating the number of subcommittees that you may want to serve upon.
Yeah, the argument there was just that we could figure that out on our own.
Yeah, I move that we strike, and no POB member shall serve on any more than 2 committees at any given time.
I second.
motion second that we strike line 25 and 26. All in favor?
Aye.
6-0.
No.
6-0. Okay.
Sorry. Moving back up on page 12, lines 12 through 15, that paragraph needs to be moved to the reporting section of the ordinance.
Did you feel as though this was not, based on the CASA, part of your wheelhouse?
Chair Waits, Vice Chair Galloway, no, this is exactly what I do for the CASA.
Okay. Okay.
For, yes, I mean, every reporting period, the monitors come in and check training and all of that. So it's exactly what I do.
There was a section that you felt like wasn't,
Coming up.
okay, all right.
Good.
I make a motion that we move, that we take a position that section 5 on page 12 be moved to, I'm sorry, what was the appropriate section?
The reporting section.
The reporting section.
Second.
That's motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
6-0.
And just so that I can make that note, where is that going to go to? The reporting section is where? Oh, like beginning page 20, line 20? Okay. Somewhere in there.
Should we just strike that portion, that line? Chair Waits.
Yes, sir.
Moving on to page 13, the subpoena. I think it's all good, except we need to remove that last line. We don't want to be responsible for, or the perception that we're responsible for entitling someone to legal counsel.
I move we strike the last sentence of paragraph J.
Yes.
On lines 18 and 19 of page 13.
Second.
It's been motion and second. Anything coming?
Oh, I was just waiting to say aye. Sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Chair Waits, I
6-0.
do have a comment now, though. I was
Sure.
going to make a second motion, just so this ensures that we take a position recommending the rest of the language in that section. The rest of the language is new, and we want to advocate for it. So I make a motion that we take a position statement recommending that section J be otherwise left intact.
Second.
Motion and second that we leave it intact. All in favor?
Aye.
And I apologize to poor Katrina for my very wordy, extremely wordy motions. I can't do it another way, I'm sorry. I try, but I fail.
Chair Waits, moving on, I believe we found the section that Vice Chair Galloway was concerned. I believe that on page 16, lines 2 through 4, that entire paragraph should be struck.
Well, this is where the city, it's the city's responsibility to make sure we're trained. And this change in the ordinance in this draft says that it should be the director's responsibility.
So I remove that we remove lines 2
Strike
through 4,
paragraph
strike
I.
lines 2 through 4 on page 16.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and second that we strike lines 2 through 4 on page 16. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 6-0.
Chair Waits, now we get to the fun part. What to do about me.
I move we strike that, no.
All I'm hearing
The-
is, what do we,
The,
somebody do, Maria?
the issues surrounding contractual, full-time, there's been the idea floated for independent contractor, which I think we all have come to understand that that would not work because of supervisory restrictions. So I don't know what to do here.
Well, I think that the implications are for them and also for our independence. Our interest is strictly our independence. But they have other issues, and that's what we learned at this meeting. The supervisory thing, which Paul brought up at our last board meeting, is one thing. I think that we, with contractual out, city employee directly responsible only to the POB, is the best we can do it for now, because we're not the only one that's impacted by this decision. So that's my understanding of what we left it, that they were going to look through, because I can't believe they don't have somebody else who's in a similar category. They haven't solved this problem somewhere.
Is the expectation that he's going to remain a city employee?
Well, he has to be a city employee to supervise the rest of the staff.
Okay.
That was one of the things that came up, that Paul brought up and they mentioned as well. So I think there are we could come up with other words, but we don't know what that means to them, and what implications that has for them.
It seemed to me that this burden is just, by its very nature, falling on city legal. And it sounded to me like they're also totally at a loss, but also working on it.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Well,
I think
she's
that
here. The city attorney's here.
That's true. She could speak for herself instead of having me talk
Let us
for
not
her.
put words in your mouth, dear.
Good evening, Chair Waits and members of the board. We did review the administrative instruction, which was referenced by your attorney, Ms. Gooch, and we do think that, well, we're still working on it, is the short answer. The administrative instruction does allow for independent contractors to supervise city employees. There has to be certain conditions that are met. We are continuing to evaluate whether that is or is not a possibility at this point, given the CPOA's structure.
So I think
we don't have an answer.
Yeah, well, but you're in the process of getting, do you agree that you're the best one to come up with an answer for this?
We will certainly be advising the city and the city council as to what we think is the best solution,
Right.
and keeping in mind the CASA's requirements for independence. We are working on doing that. It will be the city council who votes on whatever language is
So
adopted.
I would say that this is unresolved, and that it's unresolved just because we can't resolve it. You could make a side note that says, our interest is in independence. What they have to call it is their interest. And so I would keep it highlighted and say that it's unresolved at this point.
Yeah, I just want, this is sort of an aside, but we'll need to just track this, because if, a bunch of weird new language comes through or something, we might have to meet about it or something. I don't want EdTech to be an independent contractor. That would suck, you know.
Well, he'd lose benefits. There's all
Right.
kinds of things that would
We have our
happen.
differences, but I want him to be able to see a doctor, you know, retire. So I think, if that's gonna be the suggestion,
Well,
I'm gonna
that's-
wanna be able to oppose that, you know?
Well, and I think that that's what we're saying, is that right now, we don't have enough information to resolve this issue and as a
Yeah.
suggestion, because it doesn't just affect
Chair
us.
Waits, I don't think it's our issue to resolve. I think the city has a process for dealing with this, and I think they're the ones who are going to decide how to deal with it. I think it's been established that, what the ground rules are, and the details, I think, are going to be left up to the council to decide, and that's the way they write legislation, and they do it with the aid of the city attorney. So, I think we're just trying to discuss something that we really
Can't fix.
we can't fix, and we should stay out of it.
Okay.
So for you, that means just highlight.
I got it.
Okay. Okay, Ed?
Perhaps you would entertain the notion as a motion, I'm Dr. Seuss now, that the CPOA Director Qualification Selection, Retention, and Evaluation section,
Thank you.
essentially 9-4-1-7 must come into compliance with CASA paragraph 279.
Which says what? I don't know. I don't have it in front of me.
Which establishes your independence for hiring the executive director, that it's under your purview, that it's not to come to city council for their review, for their rejection, for their vote.
Okay, so you're saying all of B1 or B2 or all of both of them?
Both.
Okay, so can we just, what I heard the city say is, we want this language to stand after the CASA is no more. So what, can we take the language from the CASA and insert it into this so that then it's compliant with that and then it lasts forever?
Or until the next rewrite.
Chair Waits, Board Member Fine, I have proposed language that I believe complies with paragraph 279 that I'm happy to present to the board for consideration. It was part of the proposed changes that are required in my legal opinion so that the ordinance complies with the CASA. The first proposed change to bring section 9-4-1-7B1 into compliance with paragraph 279, and because I have it right here, I'll just tell you what the actual paragraph 279 says about the executive director. It says, the executive director will be selected by and work under the supervision of the agency. That's what the paragraph says. And so with that in mind, what the proposed language for the board's consideration for B1 would be, the POB through CPOA staff shall accept applications from candidates. The POB shall review the applications and interview candidates and select the candidate that it finds to be the best qualified to be the director based on the candidate's integrity, capability for strong management, and abilities in investigations, law, management analysis, public administration, criminal justice administration, or other closely related fields, period. The proposed update to the ordinance to comply with paragraph 279 for the subsequent section 9-4-1-7B2 would say, upon completion of the director's initial term, the POB may reconfirm the incumbent director. Should POB decline to reconfirm the incumbent director, the POB shall appoint a new director pursuant to the provisions of subsection B1. Should the director not be reconfirmed, the current director may continue to serve in the same capacity until a new director is selected by the POB. If for any reason there is a period of time during which there is no director, the POB may appoint a temporary director of its choosing by majority vote. A temporary director shall serve in that capacity only for a period not to exceed 6 months, period.
Okay, we need all that language given to Sean.
Well, one more time, can you read the CASA?
Sure.
What the CASA said?
Paragraph 279 says, "The executive director will be selected by and work under the supervision of the agency."
There's absolutely nothing in there about a 3-year term?
No.
It's a 3-year contract.
Why? Why would we do that to ourselves if it's not required by the CASA and we have absolutely no idea where the city is going to fall on what type of employee?
I don't even, I feel like we're talking about two different things.
Well, I think we have an opportunity to do away with that we have an opportunity to make the recommendation that if the executive director is our employee, we don't have to do this on a 3-year term. We don't even know what kind of.
We can always terminate the contract.
I know, but why put it in there and force us to go through this
Well, I
process
can
every
tell
3
you
years?
that when we, can I just speak out loud, is that all right? So when we went through this, part of the, if you think about recruits for the job of executive director, they want some guarantee that there's gonna be money there for them, that the position is gonna be available to them. Doesn't mean you can't get fired. It just means that you're making a commitment, a financial commitment to the position for a 3-year period. And we only got 6 candidates the last time that we got, and one of them was the person we fired. So I'm just saying that, you know, especially if you're looking for people who are from, you want to open it up to a national search, you're restricting the attractiveness of the job by saying an annual or not a 3-year contract.
Do you have an opinion on that?
Chair Waits, Vice Chair Galloway, given the last 6 months, I understand the theory behind the 3-year contract is that it is supposed to provide extra protections from political influence. Yet, in fact, we've found that that is the exact opposite. So I believe that the position should be a full-time city employee, and that there needs to be, because the chief administrative officer has taken the position that it's a conflict for me to report to her because APD reports to her, there needs to be some other person to whom I would report aside from the POB. The complications come in that the POB are volunteers, and I think that there's language in ordinances that say that there's issues with volunteers supervising city employees. So that might be the reason why the contract employee was the route that they chose. I know that the discussions, or I'm sorry, I've been told that the discussions during the ordinance draft was that it should be a 5-year contract. But given the protections that a city employee has versus a contractual employee, I believe they're about the same. The removal procedures are outlined in the ordinance. A full-time employee would have other procedural due process available to them for cause. Certainly the city would have to protect its interest as well, so that I don't have, or the director doesn't have the leeway to sexually harass or do any other things that are counter to how Albuquerque employees should comport themselves.
Well, but the flip side of that is, if you report to us and we're not happy, the executive director reports to us and we're not happy with the executive director, what kind of hoops are we going to have to run through? We had several mountains to climb with an independent contractor that was an employee, and we kept going back and forth. Do we have to follow the city rules or no? And it was very confusing and very arduous. It really was, to get rid of the previous person who held that position. Because if it's not spelled out, it's not spelled out. So there's something to be said for that as well. We're either in charge of that position being filled or we're not, you know? So what's the middle ground? I mean, we have a stake in this as well, as far as being the one that the executive director reports to. We have to be satisfied with the work we're getting. We have to feel like, you know, that we have some influence on that person's employment. So, you know, you can look at it 16 ways to Sunday. Until we get options from the city, we're not gonna get anywhere on this. We're not gonna solve this issue right here.
I think that's fair. I think that last bit right there is fair. Yeah. I think waiting until we know what's going on there would be good.
All right,
So just unresolved items.
Yeah.
okay. All right, let's move on.
Moving on to page 17, line 23. Restricting the
That's your question.
board members from being able to file a complaint. And I believe APD, there's the technical aspects of initiating a complaint, which could be the definition of exactly what happens whenever you take in a complaint. It's initiated by the agency. And I think that there was some discussion that that should be stricken.
I mean, it was in conflict for the outreach process, as I
Sure.
recall.
Sure, Waits. As I remember the discussion, it was, we talked about this, striking just the, or initiate, and a complaint on behalf of the member of the public. I thought that there were two situations covered here. One, if a POB member would file a complaint on behalf of the public. I mean, any member of the public can, a POB member has an obligation to give the complaint information to the member of the public, and that, that takes care of it, I believe. And then in the other situation where a POB member filed a complaint on his own behalf, it just recuses the member from sitting in judgment on that complaint.
But I think the conversation was about
So-
that was already covered in our policies and procedures, that you had to recuse yourself, not only from a complaint that you might initiate, but for anybody you know. You know, it's in our policies and procedures already. You know, I mean, it's obvious bias, you know.
What was your recommendation, Director Harness? Or
Chair Waits, Vice Chair Galloway, I don't believe I made a recommendation on this one.
I'm deciding I'm weighing in favor of striking these lines. I had a different stance last time, so I'm doing a 180, but I've changed my mind. I'd like to strike them.
Okay.
Is that a motion? Or any other comment?
It was kind of a comment, but I was kind of throwing it out there to see what people thought, but I could make that motion
You're
if,
fishing.
maybe. I didn't think of it that way, but that's definitely how I'm leaning.
All right.
I mean, if it can be addressed in policies and procedures, I think that I prefer to do things that way in general.
Okay.
So then I guess I'm moving that we strike From line 23 on page 17, neither the, all the way through line 27, it's disposition. Line
Page
17?
page
Yeah, page
17.
17, lines 23 through 27.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Oh, I'll second it. Yeah.
Dolly second.
Oh, sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
6-0. You need more cough time?
No, I have more.
Chair Waits, moving on to page 18, line 14. This is the requirement that you would hold quasi-judicial hearings
Yeah, we struck
for
that
every
whole thing,
complaint.
didn't
And I believe that the board should entertain a motion to strike
we? Oh,
this requirement and any other reference to quasi-judicial hearings.
So moved.
Seconded.
Motion is second that we strike this line 14 through whatever, 33?
And Director Harness, where else does quasi-judicial appear? Just so that Chantal can have that when she writes this up. I don't remember it, but I believe you that it's there.
Let's just, can we just deal with this section, and then if it appears again later, we'll
Yeah.
deal with it separately?
That wasn't the motion, though. So if we need to
I'd like to
amend the
I'd like to
motion.
amend the motion.
Okay.
I mean, whose motion is it? Okay, I'd like to amend the motion to just deal with this, this example of, or instance of quasi-judicial.
So is your motion to strike all of sections D and E? Quasi-judicial then appears, okay, there it is.
Wait.
Is that your motion?
But he goes,
No.
I'm amending.
Well,
I know.
Oh,
Is
my-
that your
my
amended
amend-
motion?
I'm amending the motion to, which was to strike all cases of quasi-judicial, or all instances of quasi-judicial hearings, to just deal with this particular mention of quasi-judicial.
Okay,
So it's D, 1, 2, 3.
thank you. Is that accurate?
That's
D-
my amendment.
Okay.
Yes.
Don't I have to accept that? That's
Yes.
my motion.
Yeah.
So that's D, 1, 2, and 3, is that right? Dr. Cass?
Yeah, I haven't found, I'm talking about this section on page 18, lines
I don't have
14,
the same paper you do.
14 through.
1, 2, 3.
Through-
Yes, 32, through line 32.
May I cut in here because I think we're really talking about a larger section than that continues
too.
on to the next page.
I do too.
Page 19, all the way through the first line on page 19 through line 15.
All right.
So then are we just dealing with?
You think need to be struck?
So then I think we're dealing at this time with page 18, beginning at line 14, through page 19, ending at line 15. Is the motion currently that be struck?
That's my question. That's my question.
Is that your motion, Dr. Hess?
Yes, it's my motion.
I don't know what the original motion was, but I was just dealing with, I was just trying to separate these into.
Can we
into
clean
si-
slate it?
Different
All right.
situations.
I understand.
If this one instance includes everything up through page.
Okay. Let's carry
20.
the original motion, which can't remember. And let's close that out, and we'll close it out with all no votes, okay?
Okay.
And then we'll have a revote. All in favor of the original motion? 6-0.
For
Okay.
no,
For no.
to
Well,
against.
Yes.
Go ahead and take the.
Or I guess,
Okay. Any objections? Or no votes?
I vote
We're all
no.
voting no, right?
Right.
We're all
Okay.
voting no.
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 Okay,
No.
6-0 no's. Okay, thank you. Now, we'll entertain the new motion.
I move that we strike, beginning on page 18, sections D, E, and F.
I second your motion.
Thank you.
You want F2?
Okay, that makes sense. Yes.
All right. All in favor of,
I'd like clarification. When you say D, E, and F, do you mean, are we talking about the new language, or are we talking about
The whole thing.
the whole thing?
The document that's in front of us, I would strike sections D, E, and F. The whole thing.
So if I'm clear on this, isn't section F, for example, already in the ordinance? That upon approval of findings and recommendation by the POB, the director shall prepare and submit a public record letter to the civilian complainant with a copy to the chief of police.
If it's already in the
Etc.
ordinance, then it's
Okay.
duplicative, right?
I think what Dr. Cass is getting at is the motion actually needs to be, that in sections D, E, and F, that we are taking a position against incorporating any of the new language that has been suggested.
I withdraw my motion.
okay.
Is that the best way? Yeah, because
Yes,
you're right,
right.
that stuff should still be in there.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, if someone, did I make that motion, or did I?
No, you just made
You
a
just
comment.
clarified that.
Clarified
Okay.
his motion.
I make that motion.
Okay.
Sure. The motion is that for sections D, E, and F, beginning on page 19, or no, sorry, beginning on page 18 through 19, that we take a position against the adoption of any new language to those sections.
I second.
Yes.
It's motion and second that we adopt
That we
language.
don't
Any
ad-
questions?
That we don't
That we
adopt.
don't adopt. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
We got there, guys.
Yay!
All right, thank you.
Although-
Quasi-judicial shows up in. the
Where
next-
else does the quasi-judicial show up?
It's
At the bottom of
line
19.
419A in about,
At line 30.
yeah.
Okay. I make a motion that we take a position against the incorporation of the new language found on page 19, lines 30 through 31.
Second.
Motion and second that we take position on line 31, page 19. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. 6-0.
I have one more thing that I brought up at the meeting that I would like to bring up here for your thoughts and consideration. I think that there is great confusion over calling the agency, the Civilian Police Oversight Agency, and calling the board, which is a governing board, the Police Oversight Board. It's like when we do outreach, we have to sell 2 cars, not 1. And it's confusing. If our purpose is to get people to submit complaints and to communicate with us, we shouldn't be selling 2 different bodies. So my suggestion is that the ordinance not call us the Police Oversight Board, but call us the Board of Directors for the Civilian Police Oversight Agency. I think it makes it cleaner for the public to understand. And unless there's a reason for us not to do that, I would suggest that we clean up. We have an opportunity here to clean this up, and I would suggest we take it.
Okay, any comment?
Is there any way to shorten that? Like, can we call it the Civilian Police Oversight Board?
Is that shorter? I was just,
Yeah, the Police Oversight Board or the Oversight Board for the Civilian Police Oversight Agency is.
No, I would just call it the Civilian Police Oversight Agency, and we're the Board of Directors.
Okay.
Period. There's just one name, Civilian Police Oversight Agency, for which we are the board.
I like the idea of the rename. I like the idea of us not sounding like we're 2 different entities. Board of Directors, would give me pause because This is a little bit different from the board of directors you otherwise find out in the wild, right? Because we have all of these like statutory authorities. And so then that could create just a different confusion on a different topic, right? So like
Okay,
right now it's
So then if
confusing.
you just say it's the board of the
Yeah,
Civilian Police
board
Oversight
of
Agency.
the Civilian Police Oversight Agency, maybe, yeah.
You know, if you want to drill down into the policy, it gives us the powers that are inherent in it. I just think that, I'm good with that. I think that if we're the board of the Civilian Police Oversight Agency, that's good.
I like that idea.
Any other comment?
I would oppose that. I think this is a significant change, and I don't believe this is an appropriate time to do that. It's just simply too much already embedded in the process, I think, or invested in the process that creates us as we are, and I think it's just opening a can of worms with not very much benefit. So I would oppose that motion.
Any other comment?
Can't talk. I agree with Board Member Fine. Excuse me, I'm really tired. I think this is the opportune time to do this, and we might not get it again. And I think it really helps define who we are.
My thought is that it's worth bringing up in the conversation. We're negotiating all these other things. I'd at least like to have a conversation. There may be a great reason to have two different names. I just don't know what it is. So maybe we can have that conversation and bring it up in there and find out.
Yeah, maybe we could just have it addressed, like as in our document or whatever, as a point of discussion.
Okay.
Wait.
I'm actually really good with a vote on a rename.
I,
Well, these are just suggestions
Right,
for the
exactly.
conversation anyway, so.
I agree.
Can I make a comment? There was a reason they created the Police Oversight Board. I just can't remember the full details when they did that, so maybe
You're not the
getting-
first person to say that. Everyone
May-
said that at the.
Yeah,
Nobody
maybe,
could remember.
right,
Yeah.
maybe getting someone that remembers why, there was a reason to have that conversation with.
Was it a reason for the creation of the board, or was it a reason for the name of
They said
the
the
board?
There was always a board.
Yeah,
It was,
It was a
Well-
commission before.
yeah. But I can't remember why it was considered a
Well, that's
POB,
what,
but,
all I'm saying is we could bring it up in the conversation
okay,
and find out.
all right.
Okay,
All
so
Uh,
right.
then I'm going to go on ahead and make a motion that we address the topic of a rename to more closely align the board to the agency.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
So it's a motion that's second that we address the topic, have a discussion on the topic. Any questions? All in favor?
I,
Any opposed? I oppose too.
Okay.
All right, 3-4 to 2.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Harness, getting close.
That actually takes us to the end of the proposed changes. I might suggest that it could be appropriate for a break. We do have some sandwiches,
Okay.
and I might want to use the facilities.
All right.
And-
I move we break
Hold on,
for,
hold on.
In the interest of time, might we do our closed session at the
That's
same
what
time?
I was thinking.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to take a break in the interest of time. Do we want to go into closed session?
Yeah.
If we do, can we get a motion to go into closed session
I move us into
And-
closed session?
and take a,
Second.
and take a verbal vote?
Yes.
You have to vote. Roll call.
Yes, sorry.
I'm sorry.
I move that we enter closed session to discuss, to meet with counsel regarding pending litigation and personnel issues, a closed discussion and possible action regarding pending litigation or personnel issues, matters subject to the attorney-client privilege pertaining to threatened or pending litigation in which the public body is or may become a participant pursuant to NMSA 1978, Section 10-15- 1H7 and pending litigation, IPRA, limited personnel matters pursuant to NM 1978, Section 10-15, 1H2, and the executive director's contract.
Second.
Okay. Can we get a roll call vote?
Chair Waits, before I vote, I'd like to say that I will cast a vote in support of going into closed session with the request that this meeting be conducted in a structured manner by following parliamentary procedure. It's my understanding that the Open Meeting Act, that discussions can be held around specific issues identified, but no binding votes can be taken in closed session. Actions recommended by a straw vote after discussion in a closed meeting must be passed with a board motion and vote in open session to be valid. So with that caveat, I will vote for moving into closed session.
Chantel?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Yes. Okay. We are in closed session.